Welcome to Achieving Your Optimal Health. This is, I believe, the seventh of these webinars. And just to give you an idea, we have been amassing quite a library of webinars here. And the great thing about this is that that we've got all these replays that you see here from our series intro, and then the rise of chronic conditions. What does your posture say about your physical health? What's your optimal diet? Motivating yourself all the way to your optimal health goal, energy, medicine, and energy healing. And now tonight, overcoming the impact of untreated childhood trauma. So you can see some great webinars, and to get the replay of these webinars, you just go to our team page here, Las Vegas areatrails.com/health education. Brings you right to this page. You can register for an upcoming webinar, and you can see the webinars that we have conducted so far. And the whole idea of this series is really great. What we're doing is we're combining some powerful education along with being a kind of health accountability group for each other and for guests in this webinar. So, Stacy, this is your first time, and
yes,
I encourage you and any other guests to join in. By the end of the webinar, we'll give you an opportunity to think of it, to share a health goal that you have. If you could change one thing, what would that be? And we all have shared our health goals, and this is an opportunity not only to ask questions of the experts, but also to receive expert education, to be in an accountability group that enables you to actually track your health goal and have others supporting you in your health goal. So
thank you.
Yes, and so education plus action is what we're about. And tonight we have a very special presentation. This is the first presentation we've really gotten into that begins to bring the emotional pillar of health into the center here. We've talked a lot about your physical health, and now we're really excited to bring up that emotional area of health with Loya Riggin. And let's just take a look. I just want to give you a little bit of a background on Loya. By the way, when you click on any of those images on the home page, you will go to a page that has the that's especially for the webinar presenter. There will be a webinar replay video I'll try to get up within 24 hours after this presentation, and you'll have webinar notes following, so you can review the webinar and capture any of that information and the thoughts that you had while you were experiencing the webinar that may have caused you to think of some area of transformation in your life. So for Loya, what is a CH, Loya?
It's a certified hypnotist.
Okay, very good. So Loya is a certified hypnotist and NLP practitioner, neuro-linguistic
Programming.
Programming, okay. Okay, very good. And she's the owner of Dynamic Mindset Hypnosis in Las Vegas, certified consulting hypnosis and NLP practitioner with the National Guild of Hypnotists. That's interesting. I'm hearing new organizations and phrases here, which is exciting. She serves clients all over the globe, Poland, France, Australia, as well as across the USA. And that's interesting. I hope you say something about that during your webinar. After over 20 years in corporate America, Loya launched Dynamic Mindset Hypnosis towards fulfillment of her lifelong dream of offering this powerful healing service to people who have experienced trauma and abuse. Loya's mission is to help others live their best life possible by working together to overcome the impact of the trauma and abuse, such as weight blocks, anxiety and panic, self-limiting and negative thought patterns, fear of life, and somatic physical pain, in order to be free and to live in an abundance of health and happiness while loving their life and, most importantly, themselves. Loya helps people unleash their greatest life possible. And it just struck me that if you turn all these statements around, you might get the situation where Loya meets people. You know, if she's people come to her, you know, loving their life, maybe that's the opposite of what people who approach you. Anxiety, panic, negative thought patterns. So Loya is going to be bringing all of this up. And so Loya, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and that's going to enable you to share. And we welcome Loya Riggin.
Well, thank you, David. What a wonderful intro that was. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So just sharing my presentation up here to the screen.
Awesome.
To elaborate just a little bit more on the intro, my name is Loya Riggin, and I'm a certified hypnotist. And actually, it wasn't 20 years in the corporate world. It was 25 years in the corporate world as an executive. And I actually encountered hypnosis, and it was so powerful that I went into school for quite a while, got trained in it while I was still working in corporate America, and literally changed my entire career and opened this up because I believe in hypnosis so much. It's so powerful. Tonight we're going to talk about overcoming childhood trauma with accelerated recovery through hypnotherapy. And I'm really excited to be discussing this with everybody. Moving on to the first slide here. Many adults are impacted by trauma that occurred during the formative childhood years. And trauma creates a shift in the child's subconscious mind, which in turn creates deep-rooted negative self-beliefs, self-esteem, self-blame, and a myriad of other symptoms that escalate with time and last a lifetime unless treated. And as we discuss this more, we will discuss and identify traditional modalities of treatment as well as accelerated healing through hypnotherapy. So we're going to start out with identifying some common forms of childhood trauma. There's neglect, and neglect is probably the one abuse listed here where adults really aren't sure if they suffered from neglect as a childhood abuse. They don't realize that it's a childhood abuse because they're left alone to dress themselves, feed themselves, care for themselves. So they weren't hit or beat or touched, and so they oftentimes don't realize that that is a childhood trauma. It is abuse. But again, there's also verbal, sexual, physical, and emotional. And I don't think that I need to go into those for people to understand what they are. I think they're pretty self-descriptive. But if you do have any questions, I have questions at the end or questions during, whatever works for all of you. Happy to answer any questions. So those are some of the more common forms of childhood trauma. And when childhood trauma is left untreated as small children, and when we suffer abuse, it's too hard for us to blame adults. Like, to us, adults are everything. Our parents are, they're just bigger than life. And so as children tend to internalize and blame themselves. It's extremely common. And when they do that, they start coming up with these negative self-beliefs. And so negative self-beliefs are unhealthy thought patterns formed in the subconscious mind by childhood thoughts learned through traumatic events. The negative thought patterns limit us in our lifetime by creating falsehoods about who and what we are capable of. And some examples are, I'm not good enough. I cannot tell you how many times I hear successful adult humans tell me that they are not good enough, that they don't feel good enough, they don't think they're good enough, and they never have. I have no value. I don't fit in. That's a big one. So many people think they don't fit in with other people. I'm worthless. I'm not smart enough. I'm bad. Nothing good ever happens to me. I won't amount to anything. And so those are just a few of the negative self-beliefs that people have, and they repeat themselves all the time, which is actually super sad that they just talk this way to themselves, because they would never talk to another human being this way. Not ever. So moving on, I want to talk about the 5 pillars of optimal health and how unresolved trauma and negative self-beliefs affect these 5 pillars of optimal health. The 5 pillars of your physical self, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual make up a whole for any person. It makes a well-rounded human being. And you need all of these things in order to have a healthy, have health and wellness, basically, which is what we're talking about. For optimal health, you need to be good in all of these areas. You need to feel good in all of these areas. However, when you suffer from childhood trauma and you have these negative self-beliefs about yourself, these are some of the things that you experience as far as each one of these pillars. So people who suffer from childhood abuse, survivors, I like to call them survivors, maybe some of the physical things that they experience as far as unresolved negative self-beliefs may manifest themselves in the following ways physically. They may experience an ability or inability rather to protect themselves. When they couldn't protect themselves as children, they never learned to protect themselves as adults. They may gain extra weight as a subconscious protectant. We'll talk about that a little bit more later because it's extremely interesting. They may feel physically uncomfortable in their own skin, as if their body doesn't fit or represent who they really feel they are inside. They don't really have that connection. Survivors live in their head most of the time and experience a disconnect to their own body and physical sensations. And by disconnect, you may ask somebody who is a survivor how they are feeling. Are they, for example, are you hungry? They may not know because they have a complete disconnect from their body a lot of times. They're so in their head all of the time, thinking and thinking. They also, a survivor also may experience somatic, which is a mystery illness and conditions, and therefore they feel as if they are physically weaker and sicker than their peers, as if they're somehow not as strong as their peers. And we'll talk a little bit more about somatic illnesses later, which is also extremely interesting. Another thing that's very common for survivors is a state of hypervigilance, where they're very jumpy. If they hear a sound, they about jump out of their skin. They're in fight or flight mode, tense and ready for an attack at any given time, and always ready for danger, even though most of the time they aren't even consciously aware that they're in that state of being. So moving on, we're going to talk about the mental aspect. Negative self-beliefs lead to mindsets and mental conditions such as anxiety, that's super common, depression, also super common, panic attacks, low self-esteem, a lack of confidence, social anxiety, and a lot more. I mean, I don't have time to list everything that unfortunately, that it impacts as far as mentally. Emotional, On an emotional level, survivors experience some common emotions such as chronic worry, that's a biggie, sadness and overwhelm, feeling unsettled, stressed, a lot of self-hate, unworthy, feelings of being unworthy, and they suffer emotionally. They want to be alone. They feel isolated and alone. Social, on a social level, socially the survivor will often experience the following in social environments: anxious and uncomfortable in social settings. They don't know how to conduct themselves because they don't feel that they fit in. So they have problems conversating, and that's very difficult for them. They don't enjoy social settings many times. And they typically don't have close friendships. The reason being is that if you let someone in close, then they might discover that you're broken. And even though they're not broken, they truly believe they are. They just hold everything guarded and close, and they don't want anybody to realize the depths of thoughts and emotions that they live every day. So they're very guarded. So no close friendships, that's very common. They're anxious and uncomfortable in work settings. And it may not be, for example, if they're at their desk working, but if you bring them into, for example, like a company meeting where they have like some, social, what do you call them, like icebreakers, little games, they don't want to talk publicly. They feel like they may make a mistake, they may be ridiculed. And I actually know people who experience anxiety and panic attacks so bad at company events such as that, that they literally will call in sick or leave the room and not be able to go back. Another thing that they experience socially is a lot of failed romantic relationships due to self-sabotage. They don't want to be hurt. So socially, they tend to subconsciously sabotage relationships eventually, so that they're the ones walking away and avoiding the hurt. And it's pretty much a self-protection method. And then self-imposed isolation, we've talked about that, but socially they do often isolate themselves. They don't feel like they fit in. It's uncomfortable. They have social anxiety. They don't want to go out. They feel good just being in. So if we talk about it on a spiritual level, what survivors experience, survivors often experience extreme spiritual views such as, and these are some that I've personally heard myself. They're angry at a God that would allow them to suffer. Insignificance, they feel that they are very insignificant to a level that they believe that God doesn't even hear them because they are so unimportant to God. God is angry with them as they are bad and can't be good enough, just as they are not good enough for their parent or parents. Very common. They believe that relying on God is a weakness in themselves, and if they were a strong enough person, then they don't need God, because weakness is having to rely on a God. And then sometimes you have the total opposite, where somebody will immerse themselves, the survivor will immerse themselves into spirituality so much because they're trying so hard to be good and pure and good enough for God. So you really have these extremes there. And as we move on now, past that, we're going to talk a little bit about somatic pain, the mystery illnesses and disease that doctors can't find the source of. So somatic pain is quite simply when you are abused in any way or suffer trauma, experience trauma, you internalize a lot of emotions, especially as a child. You have to hold in anger and distress and great fear and terror, because all you're trying to do is make it through this day so you can wake up in the morning and go to school the next day or eat your dinner, or you literally deny your own feelings and sensations, and oftentimes they're very powerful. So you internalize all those and you keep stuffing them down and stuffing them down. And eventually these emotions have to make their way out. And when they make their way out, basically when the trauma is unresolved and those negative emotions are left untreated, those emotions and beliefs will internalize and manifest into symptoms of illnesses and conditions that physicians just can't find the source of, because they're caused from all that internalized emotion that has not been processed or released. And some of the conditions that are very common for somatic illness would be migraines. People who suffer from a lot of migraines or stomach ailments, a lot of pain in their stomach, and that can be children or adults. And in fact, I know some people who've experienced trauma who have had stomach conditions their entire life from childhood. They have skin conditions. It starts coming out through their skin in the form of psoriasis or eczema. So they suffer from skin conditions, mysterious body aches and pains, no reason for them, and yet, they're just, those untreated emotions and unprocessed emotions are just showing themselves through those bodily aches and pains. And then the list of physical ailments actually are limitless. In fact, there are a number of people in my field and in the fields that I work around who believe that when we never process those emotions over a lifetime, that we actually start getting terminal diseases such as cancer and several other diseases, because we've never processed all of that negative emotion, and we need to get through it. Moving along now, and if you guys have any questions, you can ask away or you can wait till the end, whatever works for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about modalities to treat unresolved childhood trauma. So some frequently used therapies are hypnotherapy, and that's newer, but more and more people are starting to use it, because with hypnotherapy, you can not only regress back to the childhood very quickly in one session, you can regress back and you can reframe the memory and anchor in new memories, more pleasant memories, and remove a lot of the terror. And the best part with hypnotherapy is you do not have to relive or re-experience the traumatic event or events in order for healing to take place. So that's a real biggie. The psychoanalysis. So psychoanalysis is like what you see in the movies. Psychoanalysis was created by Sigmund Freud, and it's where basically the client lies on a sofa and the therapist or psychiatrist, whoever is treating these people, will take notes while the person on the sofa, the client, talks about their dreams, their early childhood memories, and then they try to make sense of how this has created the issue. Behavior therapy and cognitive behavior therapy is therapy in which you basically are exposed to the areas of your trauma. So you would gradually face your fears. And when you do that, something that as children, we have these events, and as a small child, it's like, ooh, it's so big. And as we grow, it gets bigger and scarier and bigger and scarier in our mind. So these memories as an adult are just so super powerful. But the reality is that's all stemming from a child's mind. And it gets bigger and bigger and scarier. Whereas as an adult, we process things completely differently. So when we go back and we face those incidents or things that we don't think about because they're so scary and awful for us, we realize that they're not as scary or as big as we thought they were for the many years that we were growing up. Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. Now, this has been around at least for the last several years, EMDR. It's very interesting because it's basically therapy that's based on the client follows images from either a light that the therapist is shining or their finger. So they're following their eye movement to whatever the therapist is having them do. And sometimes the therapist will also use a little audio to help, but typically it's eye movement that basically processes and gets rid of the trauma. It's used a lot for PTSD, and that has a lot in common with hypnotherapy, because we were also trained to, when someone is very stressed or overwhelmed, to literally make them follow our fingers in designs, and it completely brings their stress level down and makes it evaporate. So there's a lot with our eyes moving that can eliminate a lot of stress and trauma. And then there's the psychodynamic therapy, and basically the gist behind this is that the therapist believed that there was that the client was stuck in one certain stage of the trauma, and they've never been able to get past that, to process it and integrate it and move it into their past. So they basically talk to them, find out the area they got stuck, help them to process and to integrate. And group therapy has been around for quite a while, and group therapy is used in conjunction with individual therapy. And group therapy may be ran by a therapist, or it may be ran by a peer. And the group that you're in should definitely be at the stage of healing where you're at. I mean, you don't want to go and be in the initial part of your healing and then be with people who are in the last quarter of their healing. So you want to make sure the group you're in is at the stage of healing that you're personally at. Do you have any questions on any of that? Oh, okay.
That's a very good summary, Loya. Thank you for putting that all together and putting things in perspective to the larger healing modalities of trauma.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. I could talk all day about this. I love it. I love it so much. Okay, so a few years back, Health Magazine conducted a comparison study of individuals who received treatment in psychoanalysis, behavior therapy, and hypnotherapy. And the findings were as follows. And this totally blew me away, and yet it doesn't blow me away, because my first 2-hour hypnosis session literally changed my life and my memories. It was incredible. So they found that people that go to psychoanalysis have a 38% recovery rate after 600 sessions. Now, if you were going every week for a year, that's 52 weeks. So you're looking at 5 years there, 5 years of weekly therapy, if I'm doing my math right, with only a 38% recovery rate. Now, if you go to behavior therapy or cognitive behavior therapy to kind of face your fears, you have a 72% recovery after 22 sessions. So you're looking at almost a half of a year of weekly therapy. And then you go to hypnotherapy, there is a 93% recovery rate after 6 sessions. The sessions are 60 to 90 minutes long for 6 consecutive weeks. And bam, it's life-changing. It changed my life, I'll tell you that. After 25 years of doing what I did, that's how impressed I am with hypnosis and how much it changed me. So this is a great example of the accelerated healing power of hypnotherapy. Instead of going to 5 or 6 years, you can just go for 6 weeks and do a lot of healing, permanent healing. Super incredible.
You're going to get into why that is so, are you not?
Why? What is so?
Why is there such a greater percentage of recovery for hypnotherapy? I imagine you're going to get into that, but that really.
Well, I have some things, but you know what? I'm happy actually to discuss that right now, because the reason why it is so much greater is the rest you're just talking. So we have our conscious mind, and then we have our subconscious mind. Our subconscious mind is mostly impacted from the age, everything we take in and learn about life, about everybody around us, about our environment, about ourselves, is learned and taken into our subconscious from before the age of 3 to the age of 7. That's the biggest impacting years for everyone. We learn everything about our whole world and who we believe we are at our core from those years. And yes, you're taking in things later in life, but the fact of the matter is, I have people who call me and say, I want to work on this. I want to work on my weight, for example. And I say, great. But in my mind, I know I'm going to do a 45-minute assessment with them, because a lot of times people think they have an issue, but it's not really the core issue in their subconscious mind that's driving them to have these things, these habits or these conditions. So the thing is that when you go to talk therapy, you're really just talking with your conscious mind, which controls about 10% of what we do. 90% of what we do every day is driven by our subconscious mind. Here's a perfect example. You're driving to work, and maybe you got a good long commute, but you're talking to somebody on the phone and you're thinking about your plans for the day and the things you need to get done. And then you get to work and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember the drive here. That's because your subconscious mind was literally driving on autopilot. We do things all day long, habits. Habits are our subconscious mind. All the habits that we have are our subconscious mind driving us. Our conscious mind only, like I said, takes care of about 10% of what we do each day. So when you're talking about working with talk therapy, like those first two therapies, versus working directly with the subconscious mind, letting the conscious mind basically be at rest, be asleep, while that person, my clients, are so relaxed to a state of nearly being asleep, but not being asleep, we can easily work with the subconscious mind, go back and regress them back to the incidents that changed their life, the key incidents. And all I need to tell them is go back to the key incidents that made you feel this way. See that incident now, and bam, they are right back there in that childhood, and they can tell you exactly what happened, how they felt, everything. And then we go in and we reframe that memory. We break it down. I have them experience it from all different ways. And then I have them bring in a more positive view. I then anchor that with a symbol into their body so that it's anchored in them for life. And I'll give you a perfect example. So on my first session of hypnosis that I ever had, the one that changed my life so much, my therapist regressed me back to childhood, and we went through this whole process of taking care of some trauma. And at the end of it, she said, God is in the room and he loves you so much. He loves you powerfully. And she said, if God were a symbol, what symbol would it be to you? And I said, it would be a cross. And she said, what color would it be? And I said, it would be silver. And she said, then store that cross, pick a place in your body and store it. I stored it in my chest so that whenever I have any issues, I immediately think of it. And she said, what does that cross represent to you? And I said, this cross represents God loves me. And to this day, this is no joke. When I drive around town anywhere, I'll see a silver cross somewhere and I'm like, oh my gosh, God loves me. So you anchor it in. I don't even think twice. It's, oh, God loves me. So that's how powerful it is, because you're literally changing and reframing and anchoring new thoughts and new patterns of thinking into their mind. And from that moment forward, forever, it's done. That's why the success rate is so high. But here, outside of counseling therapy, here's some things, or hypnosis therapy, I should say. Here are some things that you can actually do to help replace negative self-talk. And just empower your mindset and empower yourself, love yourself. So it would be with affirmations and with meditation. And I'm pretty sure that most people know what affirmations and meditation is, but just in case they don't, I went ahead and looked it up in the dictionary. And these are the actual dictionary definitions. So affirmations is a statement intended to provide encouragement, emotional support, or motivation, especially when used for the purpose of autosuggestion. And autosuggestion is, of course, that instant, thought coming out. Meditation, the act of meditating, continued or extended thought, and contemplation. So I wanted to tell you about it, but for those who haven't meditated, I actually want to do a couple-minute meditation exercise right now, if that's okay.
Wonderful.
And what I'd like you all to do right now is I want you just to close your eyes. Everybody just close your eyes and relax back in your chair. Just relax. And I'm going to have you take 3 deep breaths. And as you take each breath in, this cleansing breath in through your nose and really deep in, as you let it out on the exhale, I would like you to imagine worry, stress, tension leaving your body. So starting with me now, take a deep breath in through your nose, beautiful cleansing breath. And as you exhale out your mouth, imagine tension, stress, worry leaving any parts of your body, just going, bubbling right out. Take a second deep breath in and hold it at the top to the count of 3. Just feeling good. And as you exhale, let any more worry, stress, or tension leave any muscles in your body. Letting go. And this third last deep breath in, go ahead and breathe in through the nose. And when you exhale, I want you just to let it all out. Just go ahead and feel your shoulders drooping just a little bit, letting them drop, letting go, feeling good. And as you continue to breathe naturally and easily now, I want you to repeat this affirmation right after me, silently in your mind. I am loved and I am worthy. Every day, in every way, I am growing better and better. I am loved and I am worthy. Every day, in every way, I am growing better and better. Last time. I am loved and I am worthy. Every day, in every way, I am growing better and better. All right, so you can go ahead and open your eyes now. And that is a perfect example of meditation with affirmations. It's something positive, and it's literally taking 5 or 10 minutes a day. You don't have to go out and be in some Zen garden. You can literally sit in your bed, lay in your bed, shut your eyes, take 2 minutes to do it. And the fact of the matter is that every single one of my clients does meditation all week long when they work with me as part of their homework. They do it every single morning, and they tell themselves they love themselves and they feel good with life. And it's life-changing, and it's something that changes very quickly. So good job, everybody.
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a little short one. I'd love to do one for quite a while for y'all sometime. So now we're going to talk about weight blocks. And what is weight blocks? So weight blocks are the subconscious belief that added weight will protect you somehow. And a huge portion of women who've been sexually abused or people who have been physically abused, men too, I don't want to just rule, that's all, literally have a lot of added weight that they cannot take off. And that's because our subconscious has one job and one job to do only. And the subconscious's job is to literally make sure that we live a long and healthy life. That's its only job. So the subconscious somewhere along the way gets mistaken and thinks that the added weight will somehow protect us from the sexual abuse or the abuse or, protect us in some way. But our conscious mind has no clue what's happening. And so the inner subconscious also will sabotage us from weight loss. And you can get a good indication for people who suffer from this, because people that spend thousands of dollars on weight loss programs and diets and never lose any weight at all, maybe they lose 5 pounds or max out at 10 pounds. And sometimes, usually afterwards, they gain it back and even more. They likely have subconscious weight blocks. Their mind, their part of their subconscious mind is convinced that it's keeping them safe. And I'll give you an example of how the subconscious mind does this type of work for us. For example, have you ever been at work and you're stressed and you're tired and you're like, oh my gosh, if I could just stay home, if I could just take a few days off and watch TV and lay around and relax, it would be wonderful. And the subconscious mind says, oh, I can take care of that. And the next week, you're sick as a dog. You're home for the whole week. You feel awful. You can't even crawl out of bed because you're so sick. And that is a way that your mind listened to you, and it gave you all those days at home. But it didn't give it to you in the way that you thought. So this is how our subconscious mind can literally work for us, but not in the way that we're consciously thinking. And I know we can all relate to that one. That one's happened to me more times than I can ever count. And back to the weight blocks, literally, I believe the only way to get weight blocks, to get rid of them, is through therapy, is through hypnosis work, because otherwise people just keep that weight on. There's no way that they can keep it off forever, like is in a whole, healthy, long-term life. So now we're nearing the end, and I want to talk about the overall health and wellness benefits of accelerated trauma recovery with hypnotherapy, as broken down by the 5 pillars of optimal health. So again, it's those 5 areas you need to be a healthy, well-rounded person. So when you're talking about the physical, after you're healed, you have better health physically, you have 0 somatic illness, you're relaxed, and you have calm energy. Mentally, you have a lot of inner peace. You're living in the moment, you're worry-free. And by living in the moment, I mean you're not worrying about the past. You're not thinking of I should have did that, or I could have did that, or I would have did that. Those don't matter. You can't change the past. Would have, should have, could have, dump those. You don't need those. They're nothing but stress in your life. And then also, you're not worrying about the future, because the future isn't here. It will always be just today. So you're in the moment a lot more mentally, and that's so freeing. Just ask me about it sometime. I could go on forever about it. This would be the biggest worry wart before hypnosis. Emotionally, you're happy, you have a joy-filled life, you're upbeat, positive attitude, you feel good about life because you're in the moment, you're happy and it feels good. And sure, emotionally, you're still going to have the occasional down, but you're not going to be living down there. You're going to be still up here, feeling good, feeling happy. Socially, no more isolating, which is wonderful. People were not meant to be alone. And you develop close friendships because you realize you're not broken, you're just human, and you didn't do it, it was done to you. You also develop meaningful relationships that you won't sabotage anymore, which is awesome. We all need people, we all need love. And then spiritually, you start feeling valuable and worthy, and you feel connected to God, and you feel like you're part of the universe, which is huge. Everybody is all part of the universe and connected to God, and everyone should feel that way. So these are the 5 pillars of the optimal health. And once you're healed, you can't go wrong because it's really beautiful. And so that brings us to the end. And if anybody, I'll take questions after this, but if anybody were to want to contact me, again, my name's Loya Riggin. My email is loyashypnosis@gmail.com, right there, like it says under Dynamic Mindset Hypnosis. And my phone number is 702-802-1291. And my website, if you want to know more about what I do, is www.loyariggin.com. And additionally, if you pop over to my website, I have a free 15-minute hypnosis meditation on self-esteem and relaxation, and you can go download that for free. It'll have a pop-up after about 30 seconds as soon as you enter, and ask you if you want that for free. And you don't even have to give me your email. I'm nice like that.
Very good.
So that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
And definitely unmute yourself if you have a question so that we can hear you. So go ahead. Who's got a question for Loya?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay.
So you have the chart with all the different modalities, hypnotherapy, behavioral.
That one?
Yes.
Yes.
Where does NLP fall in this?
Well, hypnotherapy, you could do NLP, but I wouldn't say it's a complete, like for childhood trauma. NLP is the neuro-linguistics programming, which is basically talking. It's a lot of people in business use it because you start using words and terms that maybe the people in your field would use, or your industry, or you're more convincing, or you're more persuasive. So that's how I would describe NLP. Not exactly as a treatment for, like childhood trauma, because it's speech patterns, it's neuro-linguistic, speech programming.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Not really, because I don't know. I haven't, been exposed to NLP, so I don't, I only understand the general concept of it, but I do understand what you're saying.
Yeah, NLP is basically something that is used, it's a way of speaking. So it's a way of learning to speak, and you speak this way, like you program yourself in this neuro-linguistics so that your words are more convincing. There's also techniques like leaning in. You will have a lot of business people and high-profile people, politicians who use NLP because they teach you things, leaning in, using words, power words kind of, and it's just a whole way of learning to speak to others that kind of grabs their attention more. Whereas hypnotherapy is a series of modalities. I mean, there's 100 different approaches to curing people for whatever they need, if that makes sense. So they're kind of 2 different things. I hope that was helpful. We can talk about it more later if you like, Gus.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thanks.
You're welcome, sir.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question with the childhood trauma. Would a fair amount of people be like surprised, or not really surprised, but after you explain a lot of this to them, their feedback?
Yes, a lot of people are surprised. I actually had a very abusive childhood. the entire childhood. And I was a huge workaholic. I mean, I was always like the division leader, the division manager, and, you know, promotion, promotion, promotion. And that was actually one of the symptoms of childhood trauma, is being a workaholic, because you're trying to literally distract your mind and keep it so busy all the time that you can't think about that stuff. There's no time or room left for it. So there's a lot of things that are very surprising. And what's most surprising is that the majority of people that I work with are a lot of high-powered business women who are so successful, but they're lacking confidence. They're lacking self-esteem. They don't believe in themselves. And I get a lot of gentlemen like that too. So it's really surprising. And
That sounds like the imposter.
Are surprised. They're surprised too.
Yeah, I've heard the phrase the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And that people have. They may be doing very well, but they feel like they're an imposter. They shouldn't be doing so well.
Exactly. They feel like they don't deserve it. And if anybody found out the real them, well, they'd just get rid of them because they're really not good enough to have that job, or yet they're doing it and they're killing it. They're doing it awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that middle age can bring out a lot of this as well because of different changes that go on, like with empty nest syndrome and maybe divorce and different things that may bring this up?
Yes, I think that there's a large group of people who and I don't really like pictures, but it's true, it's women. A lot of women in their 50s tend to have a lot of this stuff start coming up and start bothering them, or they can't figure out why they can't lose all this weight when they're working so hard, or, you know, all of these different things that they have. And yes, it does come up in the 50s. A lot of women, it comes up in the early to mid 20s. So, you know, it's just, I mean, everybody's individual, but if you're talking on a large scale, yes, definitely women in their 50s, late 40s.
So when Denise said that, I started laughing because I just had a conversation with Dawn. I was like, you know, I find myself more angry. Is it because we're 50? What's going on? Where did this come from?
I actually have to say that I have a friend who is in his late 30s and looming on 40, and he's going through the same thing that we women go through.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's like just crying. And I call it menopause. I think that
Menopause.
men and women go through it the same. It just, you know.
Yeah, guys like to think of, when they think about hormones, they think to say, oh, women go through hormones issue. They are who they are because of hormones. But I'm like, yeah, us too. We go through hormones have a big impact on us as well.
We're all human, right?
Absolutely.
For sure.
You know, this brings up a lot of things in my thinking. One thought that came to mind as you were speaking is anytime I am exposed to a presentation like this, I always begin to think I have all the issues that are being mentioned. and I think that there's a good part to that, in that when you begin naming issues, that helps people to surface some of the issues that they might be experiencing. So that's not entirely bad.
Agreed. And if you think about it, I mean, in our generation, I mean, kids were, back in the day, kids were to be seen and not heard, and it's all about the adults, and you just sit there and don't say a word. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of us carrying, you know, these emotions and conditions, you know, at different levels, of course, but I mean, it's just part of, you know, our parents were still learning themselves. You know what I mean? So there are a lot of us.
One interesting thing about this also is that the subject is childhood trauma. So we're talking about radical things that happened in your past and barriers that creates. But there are a lot of subtle things that occur that may not have been so radical, but they're subtle barriers that we face. Like maybe we hit a ceiling at a certain point in our work life, and we just can't get beyond that next level. and there's something maybe in the subconscious that keeps sabotaging that. And so there are a lot of really subtle things that can occur that I bet are lying there in our subconscious. And how can somebody just make an assessment? Is it do they need to go to a therapy session? Is that really the best way to bring things forward, or is there a way that you can get some kind of an idea what you're facing, get a window into that subconscious?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways to get information. With so much information online, you just want to make sure that you're going to a good source, a reputable source. So I always go to the best sources that I can find. I do have on my site on my website, some additional resources. And let me put that back up there in case anybody watches this down the road. But I have some information on like what is abuse? What is it? How does it make you feel? What happened? But yeah, there's a lot of good places where you can go check. And what you're talking about your job, I get people who didn't, have abuse. Like you said, Art, it was very subtle, in different ways. And I have people who come because they can't make as much money because they feel like they have blocks. And when you start getting down to it, it goes back to, okay, their parents told them money was the root of all evil and no rich person's getting into heaven. It's easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle. And so they hear all these things and they don't even realize that to them, it's like, ooh, money's bad. And they don't realize it because they heard that as kids growing up. So then I help them realize, no, that's just, saying we change those thoughts that impact them. And again, that's stuff that the subconscious is just soaking up during those formative years.
So yeah. Since we've mentioned parents a couple of times, I do have a question. What difference do you see in siblings from the firstborn compared to the rest of the children?
As far as the way the parents treat them or the way that the firstborn behaves?
I guess issues that firstborns generally come across or end up dealing with.
Well, since I'm a firstborn of 5 kids, I will tell you my experience. They all come to me for advice and any problems they have. I am more of a take charge person because I'm the oldest, I do think. And also I've always been in managerial positions where people have always put me at the top because I think that I'm very good with people and I'm good at managing things in environments. So I see a lot of that with firstborns where they take on a lot more responsibility. Sometimes it's not really their responsibility. In my own case, about the age of 40, I had to tell my siblings that it was now time for them to make their own solutions. And they couldn't keep coming to me because I worked about 70 and 80 hours a week and they thought I was just awful, but for a little bit, they came around. But I think that as firstborns, we take on a lot more than the other siblings. And I think that we have a lot of more leadership qualities sometimes, but not always. It's not always the case.
Gotcha.
Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah. Because I'm a firstborn as well, and I always wondered why, like in the Bible, like the firstborn would get like all of the parents' stuff, right? And I think we're the ones that break the parents in, so we deal with challenges that the others don't have to deal with.
To speak to that, I am also a firstborn, and I'm the youngest because I have 2 half-brothers by a different mother.
Ah.
Yeah, so I am my only child on my mother's side, and I am the last on my father's side. So it really is a thing, though, because I'm also the only girl. And that actually has made a big difference because I have to be seen as a nurturer. So how do you feel about that? Like, not just being a firstborn, but being like the mother.
How do I feel?
Yeah.
Well, I'm 53 now, so I'm starting to feel that they need to kind of, be more in charge.
Exactly. Maybe you've already answered the question, but yes, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Loya, thank you so much for what you shared. And as you see on the screen, definitely give Loya a call or send her an email with any further questions you might have. And she's going to be coming back in a month or so, doing a webinar on weight management. Is it?
Yeah, recognizing your obstacles. So we'll be doing some of this weight work. We're going to be talking about the weight, recognizing your obstacles, your own obstacles and internal blocks.
Okay. Well, that brings up the other part of our webinar, which is, and we just have 5 minutes left today, but just to go over some of the issues that we have brought up that that stand between us where we are now and our optimal health. And so Gus, you had a sleep issue. How are you doing with that? Is that still forefront in your thinking?
Yeah, that's still a challenge. I'm trying simple things like eye mask, making sure I get a bed early. I'm trying supplements. I'm taking naps. So it's all helping to improve the quality, but I still have quite a bit to go. But I'm making improvements.
Okay, excellent. And Denise, you were working with yoga postures and gratitude. How are you coming along?
Well, I think last couple weeks I really have not done much. So it's kind of been a standstill, and so I get a little frustrated with myself because it kind of slid. But now I'm realizing that I need to get back to it because I really did see the benefit from that. And I was on vacation and out of town, so that just perpetuates some discontinuity. But I know how important it is and how good I was feeling, and now I have to get back into it. So it's just work in progress. You realize there are certain things that just kind of get you off kilter.
Okay, well, we're remembering, Denise, and so we'll keep that forefront in our thinking. And then Loya, you were talking about walking 5 miles. How's that coming along?
Since I had my bilateral spinal epidural injections, much better. I haven't got to 5 miles, but I've got to about 2.5, where I can walk like 2.5 or 3 maybe without, with only a mild pain.
Okay.
Behind and back.
Well, that's awesome. Feel you're making some momentum. Good for you. And Holly, stamina, strength, and flexibility.
Yes, well, I'm riding my bicycle probably 5 or 6 mornings in the mornings, and so my stamina is definitely improving. I can see it improving. Flexibility, probably because I'm moving and I'm packing and I'm moving boxes. I'm building up a lot of strength.
That always helps.
And the flexibility, it's kind of coming in with that too.
Well, I think sometimes the continued focus over time of these issues that we bring up is that alone can create some positive movement. And Annie, resolving nervous system stress. How's your stress level been lately?
It's been pretty good. What I have found is that I have to be aware that it exists to be able to address it. So as long as if I can identify the final puzzle piece, I'm good.
Okay. And I also like to welcome Dan Howe, who is my brother-in-law in Oregon, and I see you're on the webinar, Dan. And thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. So, anyone want to bring forth an issue just to put it in front of everyone that you would like to to see improved in order for you to be experiencing optimal health?
Well, I think just being part of this webinar, just being exposed to these different angles and approaches to health, I think it's a real good resource, because at the very least, we get to hear things and solutions for problems we might not have known we had, right? And it gets the mental juices flowing. So that's helpful.
I completely agree with Gerson. That just putting that on the trail, something to go with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you name something, you just by naming it, you gain some control over it. And my issue that I brought up a number of weeks ago was low energy in the afternoons and the evenings, and my energy level really drops off, and it's not entirely cured, but it's causing me to be aware some evenings I don't have that low energy level. And so I'm asking myself, what's the difference? And I think listening to our bodies is really important. I think a big issue often is that there are things happening and we're just not listening. Our body is trying to speak to us, and we're just not listening. Or as Loya mentioned, it can be buried in the subconscious. And so encourage each person here to be thinking of an area that if you could improve that area would bring you closer to your optimal health, because that's what we're all about here. So next week, let's take a look here. Next week, we are going to have affording medical care along the way to achieving your health goals with Sherry Martin. And she comes from an insurance industry background. Her entire career has been in the insurance industry. She's going to speak with us about creative ways to afford the medical care that you need, because sometimes you can do only so much as far as do-it-yourself healthcare, and you can have great goals, but you can reach a point where there's an accident, there's an injury, there's an illness, and you need medical care in order to stay on track. Otherwise, you're going to be derailed. And so Sherry's going to be helping us with ways to creative ideas on affording medical care along the way to achieving your health goals.
And I'd like to speak a little bit about that, David.
Okay.
Because Sherry's been helping me with health insurance and options. And until you deal with it, and some of us in the corporate world only have to deal with it once a year, but until you're dealing with it, do you realize how big of an importance and how big of a factor it is in the decisions you make concerning healthcare?
Mm-hmm.
Relies on what options you have available in your health insurance, right? You decide to go to this hospital as opposed to that one. You decide to get this treatment as opposed to that one. You get to see this doctor as opposed to that one. Why? Because of the health insurance you have. So it's we talk a lot about health and what's important, but who pays for it is just as big as importance as the decisions we make regarding health.
Definitely. And you may stay in a job that is destructive to you, that you hate, because you don't want to lose your health insurance. So yeah, health insurance is a huge issue. Okay, well, this concludes our webinar for this week, and look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 7 o'clock for Sherry Martin's webinar.